Yes, Pretzelman 945 here. Welcome back to another video. And welcome to a list I've had on the back burner for a little while. Which normally happens with a lot of lists I make. I make them and then I'm not feeling like recording at that time, and so I tend to forget about it, or I get a large quantity of ideas. I end up sort of forgetting a lot of them because I'm not very good at writing them down. But um this list is top 15 fights in any manga. So uh this is like anime manga battles type thing. This is not an all fiction list because that would be kind of impossible for me to make, I think. And I feel like if I did make that, like most of them would just be manga fights anyways. Because like I can maybe think of a few fights that aren't anime or manga contained, but it's not many. So that's why we have top 15 here. Um and yeah, we're just gonna get into it. So, before I go into the list, I think I should outline a little bit sort of my criterias that went into making this list. Um, so obviously a fight itself is entertaining because of like what actually happens within the fight itself, like the physical action of it, the way that characters fight, the certain moves that they use, the amount of twists and turns during the course of the fight, which only determines the winner. Um, so that's one thing that I was judging these fights on that I picked. The second was sort of how much I was invested in the particular characters, because like what is the reason for the fighting? Why is it happening? What effect does it have on both of the fighters involved? And number three, sort of related to the last point, but I think slightly different. Um, what is the emotional journey of the fight? And what impact did it ultimately have on the story? Why was it a necessary battle to have? So, without further ado, let's kick off the list with number 15, Alucard versus Anderson from Hellsing Ultimate. Now, there were a lot of fights I could have picked from Hellsing Ultimate because they, almost the entirety of that show is just straight aura farming from Alucard and almost every other character in the entire show whenever they're fighting literally anybody. And this fight is the peak of that aura farming because it is just these two absolute fucking beasts who constantly threaten to clash each other on multiple occasions. So there is a lot of hype and build up to that point in the story. Along with the fact they are of opposing factions, and even though neither one is particularly passionate about the organization or side they serve, they are both very willing to fight for that organization. So there's that sort of opposite perspective chemistry there. And it's just insanely badass aura farming the entire time. It is awesome. This is probably the most simplistic fight I have on this whole list because it doesn't really reflect the sort of it doesn't really have as much character or emotion as any other fight on this list. Um, but it's such a enjoyable aura farm fest that I had to include something from Helsing on this list, and I think that this fight is the ultimate uh thing what's the right word? Combination of that. And number 14 is Archer versus uh Hero Emiya from Fate Unlimited Blade Parts. Um, Now I fucking love Fate. I still need to watch more of it, but what I have seen is just fucking peak. And um, and this fight encompasses, in my opinion, all of the best aspects about Unlimited Blade Works as a show. Because Shiro Emiya is an absolutely fantastic protagonist, and there is so much subtle buildup to the sort of relationship that he has with Archer, who is my favorite Fate character of all time. And because not only is Archer just a complete badass, but the lore that's revealed about him, he has one of my favorite anime backstories as well, where like they are related, him and Hero, like going through the past, and Archer is a reincarnation of past versions of Emiya. uh it's just such a perfect connection that makes so much sense upon the build up, with all the subtle hints about like the fact that um Hero's fighting style seems to lend itself more to the whole Archer like fighting style rather than the saber style, even though she tries to teach him sword fighting, like the fact that he's able to manifest the small blades with his magic and stuff. Um, and then and this is after like Archer did these insane betrayals, and when he was already an extremely inconsistent character in terms of like picking what side he was going to be on in the first place. um and like the both of these characters, just seeing their interactions was just um insanely powerful, and it was just an extremely well done fight. Um So by contrast, even though this one doesn't have as much aura farming entertainment value, it has a lot more emotion to it. Um, well, number 13 is Aaron versus Reiner from Attack on Titan. Um, Now the reason why this fight is my favorite is because Aaron and Reiner are my two favorite characters in Attack on Titan. And um And this fight feels like the ultimate um culmination of their sort of friendship that was turned into a brutal rivalry, um because because the way they fight is just so raw, and it takes perfect advantage of both um type of titans that they are. Like it uses both aspects of their titan powers in such creative ways, and also like the way that they fight incorporates such a large variety of different like fighting styles and techniques to complement that. And the fact that this is the ultimate culmination up to this point in the story of their um sort of friendship and camaraderie turned brutal rivalry, um and sort of enemy, and how they see each other as enemies. um it's just a fantastic example of how to take two characters and progress them to that crucial point. Okay, sorry about the pause. I had to go get some water. I think I was done talking about Aaron versus Rhino, so I want to move on. Hopefully I didn't pause in the middle of talking about a particular point that I don't normally do that, but hopefully I didn't. Number 12 is Tengen Kappa Gurren Lagann versus the Anti-Spiral, the very final fight of the main series of Gurren Lagann. Now, what makes this fight so fucking awesome is a few things. The first of which, it is literally a like multiversal scale battle. That's like how extreme in power by this point in Gurren Lagann we have gotten to in terms of the character progression and such. Okay, sorry for the other pause. My cursor was having a fucking acid trip and I don't know what the hell was happening with that. So to continue. Um by this point in the story of Gurren Lagann, we are literally dealing with multiversal scaling of power, which number one is completely insane, but it makes the fight just all the more fucking awesome. Because it's like literally these giant mech things fighting on a multi universal scale, and it's just so cool. But also, this is the culmination of every character across the entire series, and especially the development that a bunch of them get in sort of the after the time skip to the second half of the story. And especially for Simon, it's like the most powerful character arc because he is nearly consumed by Anti-Spiral's darkness, but then he has Kamina's will. He sees Kamina in a vision, and that gives him the will to eventually fight back and win. And it's just such a perfect culmination. You're gonna hear me say that word a lot, culmination. It's a perfect culmination of everything that, especially the second half of the series, was building up to, and it leads to a perfect finale of Gurren Lagann. Um, at number 11 is Alibaba versus Hakuryu, from Magi. Now, um, there are a lot of fucking incredible fights that I could have picked from Magi to put on this list. And and to be up because like during this point in the story, Aladdin versus Judar is also happening, and that's also like such another fucking peak fight. But the reason why I end up deciding to pick this one is because, in my opinion, across any fight in the story, this one has the highest emotional stake. So, Alibaba is basically the main character of the story. He's sort of the unspoken main character of the entire story because even though Aladdin is technically the MC, Alibaba is the forefront of almost everything that happens in the plot itself. Um, like he is the forefront for almost every major event, and he plays a very significant role in almost every event. So there is that aspect where he is playing a significant role in terms of trying to mediate and stop the Co Empire from just going on an absolute war rampage and destroying everything. Um, or trying to keep the two factions from destroying each other and everything by going to war. Um, and then there's Hakuryu's side, who the very beginning that he's introduced, you can tell that he is an extremely complicated character with a lot of emotional conflict within him that just threatens to seriously boil over at literally any second, like Mount Vesuvius on steroids. And in this fight, is sort of the ultimate accumulation of them having been friends and then being on opposite perspectives and feeling like they have no choice to fight each other because they cannot come to an agreement on their values. And the fact and just like the clear reality of this fight, like the severe damage that both of them receive and sustain while fighting each other literally to the fucking death. And the fact that it is so close and tense to the very end, like between the two of them, who will actually win, and how it is such a amazing demonstration of how of their growth and abilities up through this point in the story is just amazing. Um, and honestly, I'm not gonna change the list right now, but the more I think about it, the more I may move this fight up in the future. But I don't know, we'll see. We're talking about all peak fights here. Like the number 10 fight, uh Sasuke Kojiro versus Kon. I don't remember his other whether that's the first or last name, I don't remember the other part of his name, from Vagabond. Now, Vagabond was another case where it was quite hard for me to pick one singular fight. Because there is just a lot of good ones on here. Um, but the reason why I ended up settling for this one is because um I feel like this is one of the best climaxes in the entirety of the Sasuke Kojiro arc, which in my opinion is far and away the best part of the story in Vagabond. And I think that this fight is the ultimate culmination of everything that we have seen from um Kojiro's character up to that point. Because what happens in this fight is that it seems like it's just going to be a simple thing of a bunch of these bandits and former warriors that are sort of trying to get revenge, and Kojiro gets tangled up in it, and that's sort of what it is at first. Um, but Kojiro ends up like making friends with these, well, not exactly friends. He ends up making enemies of them, which slowly, like, in a very strange yet surreal way, transforms into them being like rivals, like friendly rivals, who have immense respect for each other. And this is done through several different things because of the fact that all the people that he fights end up keeping him various values and aspects of fighting that help him improve. And he like learns various things from all of them. And all of these aspects culminate when he fights Kone, the strongest fighter of them all, who by far gives Kojiro his toughest challenge of maybe any opponent that Kojiro has across the entire story, in my opinion, because it is like a serious test of Kojiro's wit and skill in all aspects of his sword fighting. And this combination of these things is just, in my opinion, and it like the best possible culmination up to this point in the story of everything that Kojiro's character represents in all of his values that are being portrayed. And I think that what this fight accomplishes in doing that is just absolutely incredible. And number nine is All Might versus All for One from My Hero Academia. This was much easier to pick because this, in my opinion, is by far the best fight for My Hero Academia. Um, and so All Might by this point is well established, and so is his relationship with Deku. They have a fantastic mentor student relationship, and All Might still has that image of being the number one hero, and yet and it's like slowly been on the decline, and yet it's still like very much out in the forefront. But this fight is really the thing that sort of causes that to be not very true anymore. This is a thing that really officially sends All Might into his actual retirement. Um and believe me, I was really tempted to also include his clash in season 7 with the suit of armor, but that would honestly kind of feel like cheating to me. And so I really stuck it to this fight here. Um and and what makes this fight truly incredible is that not only is it an incredible case of All Might just seeming to consistently persevere despite the fact that All for One seems completely broken um with all of his quirks that he has at his disposal, and despite the fact that he just constantly steals them, like he doesn't manage to steal it from All Might miraculously. So All Might still has that advantage, so to speak, but All for One is still reeling from the damage that they took that All Might gave to him in the previous encounter, which is not shown on screen, but it's the reason why All Might has trouble fighting from the beginning of the show. And it's a crucial point, which makes the emotional impact of this fight all the more powerful. And the final moments of the fight, uh, where there is this subtle message that the sort of torch is passed on to Deku now, and Deku's reaction to it is just fucking brilliant. Um, this fight is, I mean, I like MHA from the very beginning, but this fight is really where I would say I fell in love with the show, truly. Um, okay. At number 8 is Roy Mustang versus Envy from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Now, Roy Mustang is my favorite character in Full Metal Alchemist Brother, not even close. Uh, and um, he is one of my favorite anime characters, and there is so much setup from the very beginning of the series with the fact that Hughes and Roy Mustang were extremely close friends, and Hughes was the very first one that very quickly was picking up on the homunculi's plot. And Envy was the one that killed him. So there is a lot of buildup there. And just the sheer unleashing of rage against Envy by Roy Mustang is just an absolute spectacle. That is the only word to describe it. Like just how endless he is with the finger snaps of and just how relentlessly he pursues and attacks and just destroys Envy without like barely any consideration until Riza is somehow able to stop him from fully finishing the job. Uh it's just um and the way that this sort of breaks down and reveals the very core of Envy's character in general is just um absolutely incredible character wise, and it's like such a complete satisfying end to Mustang's revenge arc across the entirety of the show up to that point. And number seven is Julius versus Chatri. Now this is like the ultimate culmination of everything in Black Clover up to this point in the elf reincarnation arc. Because Julius's status as the Wizard King is very much in jeopardy, I suppose, and he feels like his entire commitment must be put forth by doing this and going against this. And then there is the insane plot twist that Vengeance was actually the traitor all along, but it wasn't entirely Vengeance. It was Patri who was actually acting as Licht the entire time, and he was the true villain all along, and he was sharing Vengeance's body due to trauma bonding between the two characters, so they naturally have a very powerful connection there. And it's like the complete buildup of the entire Crater plot line, which had been going on for a good bit of the plot by that point. And Patri's initial actions here are what set in the elf invasion during the arc in the first place, and which causes the efforts having to resist. And unlike Julius's usage of time magic in this fight to save all of the citizens, even though he knows it means his ultimate sacrifice, and it won't even be able to prevent the elf effort for that long, is just incredible. And even though there are so many peak fights in Black Clover, I think that none of them have quite reached the same emotional state and build-up that this fight managed to achieve. And number six is Goku versus Vegeta from the Saiyan arc. Now, like I mentioned with All Might versus All for One, I could have very much heated and talked about every Goku versus Vegeta fight and like included the Majin fight in here. Um, and to be honest, like I fucking love that fight. And if you want to, you could say that that's like a secret hidden tie with the spot from the Saiyan arc. However, the reason why I ultimately decided to pick this fight above all the others as my favorite Dragon Ball fight is because um it is like the start of Vegeta's character arc. It is a massive point in Goku's character arc, which demonstrates his amazing character growth by being able to let Vegeta go. Um, and there's also just like so much to this fight, which makes the emotional impact just continually hit harder because of how many just absolutely intense phases there are. Because there is like the part where all of the Z fighters are fighting against Nappa and Vegeta and getting absolutely fucking destroyed. And then there's Piccolo's sacrifice, and then there's Gohan and Krillin on their last legs, and then Goku shows up. And then they start fighting, and we have the reveal of the Kaioken and the most iconic beam clash in all of anime, in my opinion, with the Kamehameha and Gallic Gun nearly destroying the entire planet and it leaving both of them just completely worn out. And yet they are still both leveling up across the course of the fight, becoming stronger at the same time, which means there is active progression within the fight. And then there's the whole thing where Vegeta turns Great Ape, which is an insane plot twist and new ability, and it doesn't feel like it came out of nowhere. And it's like this new meaning of hopelessness, and yet it's like such a satisfying end when Yajirobe finally cuts the tail off. And it's just such a fucking good uh conclusion to it too, with him being able to escape, which is ultimately the beginning, I would say, on his character arc to redemption. And the fact that this singular fight has so many different phases to it and just keeps you on the edge of your seat for such a long time makes it will always make it one of my absolute favorite fights in all of anime. Any manga, I guess I should specify. Um, and to be honest, that's one that I could also probably move higher on this list realistically, though I'm not going to change the list now. At number five, and my favorite fight from Bleach is Ichigo versus Byakuya in the Soul Society arc. Now, what makes this fight so fucking awesome is it is preceded by the absolutely incredible moment of Ichigo coming in and rescuing Rukia from execution like a total fucking badass and unleashing his Bankai for the very first time. And um Byakuya ends up doing the exact same thing, and his Bankai is my absolute favorite in the entire series. So there's that, which is just like this insanely awesome clash of two Bankais, and there is also amazing foreshadowing for each of those future power ups and character changes because of the way that the Hollow Mask ends up deciding the outcome of the fight. And what I love about this intervention by the Hollow Mask as well is it sort of feels like a lot of the fight is it's treated as this very honorable duel between the two of them, like this extreme contest of strength. that has massive buildup from when Byakuya just completely wiped Ichigo's ass at the end of the first arc and left with Rukia to go back to the Soul Society. This feels like such major payback, but then there's this element which feels like an unfair advantage, and it sort of affects Ichigo's character um throughout the rest of like the effect that it has on Ichigo's character is absolutely profound. And the combination of all these aspects, along with just it is incredibly animated, um, that's pretty much a consistent thing with every fight I mentioned thus far. They're all incredibly animated and drawn. Um, and yeah, this is my favorite fight in Bleach. Number four is Kurapika versus Uvogin from Hunter x Hunter. And this is this fight encompasses everything about what makes Kurapika my favorite Hunter x Hunter character and one of my favorite anime characters. Because he is like, he is a very friendly person. He's a good person, but ultimately his core and the core of this entire arc is him hunting down and getting revenge on the Phantom Troop for what they did to his clan. And this fight is the ultimate culmination up to the point in the story of that desire coming through. Because he just absolutely fucking wipes the floor with Uvogin completely. And and he even brings a shovel to bury his corpse, which is like just one of the coolest moves that any anime character has ever done, ever. And what I also just love about this fight is the way that it is like a perfect demonstration of everything that we have learned about Nen abilities so far. And it is such a perfect, like, representation of everything that makes Nen a deep ass power system. Because there is just all these aspects of, Kurapika using the different Nen combinations to sort of figure out how his abilities work and demonstrate his developed abilities and showing how they relate to the Phantom Troop specifically. And like the way that that also is showing the development of Kurapika's character at the same time in terms of his power and progression is just amazing. And then there's also the fact that Uvogin has an overpowered net ability and is just an absolute badass and does not make the fight easy, even though Kurapika ends up wiping the fucking floor with him. Um, and it's just a fucking peak fight. It's such a peak fight. Um, and number three is Mamoru Takamura versus Brian Hawk from Hajime no Ippo. Um, Now, there were a lot of fights I could have picked from Hajime no Ippo. There were several good Takamura fights. Um, there were so many good Ippo fights I could have chosen too, such as like my personal favorite Ippo fight, which is his fight against Sendo. Um, the second time when he's fighting for the featherweight championship belt. Or I could have chosen him versus Date, for example. It was hard to pick one. Well, not really, because like this fight was easily my favorite one, but you get my point. There were a lot of good ones from Hajime no Ippo up for the picking. The reason why this one is my favorite is because Mamoru Takamura is by far the best character in Hajime no Ippo, and also one of my favorite anime characters of all time. Um, because he is just goaded in every way. He is an insane badass. His dedication is just absolutely ridiculous. And he is the funniest character in the entire show. He also just has absolutely ridiculous aura across the entire thing. And there is major stakes to this fight because this is for the middleweight championship, like the world championship belt. There is major stakes for this. And Brian Hawk, his opponent, is an American and is just absolute sleazeball, a perfect like amalgamation of the worst American stereotypes, and it is just absolutely fantastic. He is just this completely hateable bastard who is just like scum of the earth that you want to see him get his ass beat by Takamura. And there is so much up and down to this fight. Like so much back and forth where and this is the case with every single Ippo fight. Like, obviously the hand-to-hand combat animation is just fucking exquisite, but also just the sheer like tension and sort of ups and downs that are created from every single Ippo fight are incredible. But this fight is truly like the peak of being of like the show's ability to do that because it lasts like literally every possible round through that it can last, if I remember correctly. And and it's just so back and forth. It's so up and down. There's so many moments where like one seems to be on top of another, and then Nakamura ends up winning, and it's like such a perfect culmination of all the insane hard work that he put in and how much like brutal shit his character had to go through in addition to like learning more about his family at the same time and how that impacts his worldview and why he boxes. It's just all fucking masterclass material. Genuinely. This is, in my opinion, the absolute best thing that happens in Hajime no Ippo. And there is also the additional detail of the fact that Hakamura is voiced by one of my favorite Japanese voice actors, Rikiya Koyama. And guess who they get to voice Brian Hawk? It's none other than one of my other favorite Japanese voice actors, Akio Otsuka. So this fight, in addition to everything else I mentioned, is also this incredible clash of two of my favorite Japanese voice actors just yelling their hearts out and putting on such a passionate performance. And it is my favorite role from both of these voice actors, including Akio Otsuka. I have a lot of roles I love him for, but his limited role as Brian Hawk in this fight is my favorite role of his because of the everything that happens within the fight. And number two is Netero versus Meruem, also from Hunter x Hunter from the Chimera Ant arc. Now, this fight, comparatively to Kurapika versus Uvogin, is much, much larger in stakes because we're talking about like essentially the entire image of humanity versus um the entire like cause of um Netero and the ants, or not Netero, Meruem and the ants, sorry. Um and sort of how and it's also like a fascinating twist on that very concept because it seems like Netero is the human and Meruem is the monster, and that's the base level. Um, But when you go deeper than that, the dynamic is actually flipped because Meruem is the one that ends up as a result of his profound character arc being changed by the values of human emotion and that causing him to want to pursue peace and honest negotiation instead of just mindless violence with no regard for other humans. Even though he still thinks the ants are superior to humans, he is like interested and willing to seek out human emotion and peace. Netero is the opposite perspective because he is portrayed as the sort of peak of humanity and the peak of Nen prowess. And I'll touch on the Nen prowess point in a second. But the way that he is secretly sort of acting as the monster in this situation, as the inverse of the human in terms of just the insanely powerful broken net ability he has, and the sheer ridiculous brutality of it, and the insane mass destruction it causes, and how insanely unrelenting Netero is in his pursuit to defeat Meruem. It makes him look more like the beast than Meruem does himself. And that character inverse to me is just fascinating and absolutely brilliant character writing. And then there is the Nen prowess aspect, which I said I would mention, because regarding Netero's absolutely broken abilities and Meruem's as well, where Karapika versus Uvokin as a fight was a fantastic point in progression in terms of Karapika and just Nen abilities in general being explored after the power system had been pretty recently introduced. What this fight is, by comparison, is another amazing sort of uh comparison point because of the fact that we are dealing with world destroying level Nen abilities in terms of how powerful they are. And all that together just makes Nero versus Meruem one of the best fights in all of anime. However, in my opinion, the best fight in all of Animanga, and this was decided as soon as I read these manga panels from One Punch Man. Uh, it's Saitama versus Gaara, because not only is this straight up the most visually impressive and expertly drawn and beautifully paneled fight I have ever read. Um, but it is also like it is also amazing culminations for Saitama and Garo as well. And the progression that takes place across the entirety of the fight and the scale of it is just absolutely ridiculous. So Garo takes out Genos, and it looks like he's almost dead, which like causes Saitama to get fucking insanely mad and locked in his normal way, right? It just like triggers something in him. And this is all the while Garo has entered cosmic mode, and there is basically like none of his humanity left. He has just completely succumbed to the nature of the power. And there is nothing that he can do about it. He is just a mind. It's almost basically just a mindless fighting monster. And this and the battle takes place across space time. It takes like they're fighting across multiple planets. They're like upsetting the balance of the fucking universe the entire time they're fighting. And yet, of course, because it's One Punch Man, there is also just completely ridiculous aspects to the fight as well, such as that one moment where like Saitama does a massive fart attack, I think it was, if I remember correctly. And yet the incredible thing about that is that while that kind of humor is in there and it like retains the core aspects of One Punch Man's simpler story aspects, it doesn't take away from the seriousness or the scale or the emotional impact of the fight like at all, basically. And to do all of those things in one fight while being just a feat for the eyes, uh like it is an understatement to say that every single little drawing is an absolute feast for the eyes. Like all those things happening while every single even down to the tiniest drawing is just such a visual fucking feast on the eyes. The read is just beyond imaginable, truly. And it is just by far the best fight in all of Animanga. And wow, this video was a lot longer than I expected it to be, but I guess I just like to talk about my favorite Animanga fights. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what your list looks like. What are your favorite Animanga fights? What do you think makes a good Animanga fight? What do you think of my list? But yeah, that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.